Hey everybody, welcome to the Rooted Willow Homeschool channel. Today's video is going to be about the top 5 reasons you should include Plutarch in your homeschool curriculum. I, I think most people that are trying to incorporate Plutarch probably are doing it because Charlotte Mason thought it was a good idea. So today I'm just going to go through some of the top 5, the top 5, what I think are the top 5 reasons that I think she was right. I think you should include it. So at the top of the list, or the bottom, I guess, I'm starting at 5. So the fifth of the 5 is that it's entertaining, it's fun. I I know maybe all of you aren't on board with that at the moment, but it is. There's lots of interesting things going on in the collection of lives that Plutarch wrote. You got interesting people doing interesting things in exotic places. It's just, and it's even funny sometimes. Here, let me give you an example. Now I know entertaining shouldn't be the primary guide for what you include in your homeschool stuff, but you know entertaining and educational is always better than boring and educational. So, but here, let me give you an example. This is from one of Plutarch's lives. The life of Marcellus is a Roman, and in this particular moment, he is besieging a city, and so he's got the might of the Roman army there besieging this city, but the city has Archimedes on its side, and Archimedes has come up with all these mechanisms that shoot catapults and drop rocks and do all kinds of weird things that the Roman soldiers aren't expecting, have never seen before. And it gets them so intimidated that he writes this at some point. At last, the Romans were reduced to such a state of alarm that if they saw so much as a length of rope or a piece of timber appear over the top of the wall, it was enough to make them cry out, "Look, Archimedes is aiming one of his machines at us." And they would turn their backs and run. When Marcellus saw this, he abandoned all attempts to capture the city by assault and settled down to reduce it by a blockade. So you have to imagine these Roman soldiers. They're used to war and battle, but they're not used to Archimedes, and they've been so intimidated by it that you just have Archimedes could be taking a nap at this point. When the Roman soldiers creep up, all someone has to do is just toss a rope over the wall, and the Romans just scream and run. So that's funny. I don't care who you are. That is funny stuff. So Plutarch is filled with little gems like this that make it entertaining once you begin to pick them out and appreciate them. So number 5, entertaining. Number 4, the fourth reason, is it deepens your appreciation of other works of literature. Because Plutarch was a very influential writer in the centuries that followed him. He was very popular, very influential. A lot of people incorporated his lives in particular into stuff that they did. So if you're familiar with Shakespeare, for instance, Shakespeare used Plutarch for Coriolanus and Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra. When he wrote those plays, he drew upon Plutarch for information. I also have an example here from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So this in itself is a classic of literature. So it's in the canon of literature that everybody should read at some point with Plutarch. But she brings Plutarch into this. There's a point, for instance, where the creature, by the way, the creature, if you've never read Frankenstein, you may be surprised to find out. If you're thinking of Frankenstein as the guy with the bolts in his neck and the square head that can't talk very much, that is very misleading. Frankenstein, first of all, is the guy that made the creature. It's not the creature. And the creature is a genius. He doesn't stagger around. He's a genius. He's also, athletic. I mean, so it's very different. Anyway, the creature teaches himself to read, And here's an account of where he comes upon Plutarch. So Mary Shelley is, she writes here, one night during my accustomed visit to the neighboring wood, where I collected my own food and brought home firing for my protectors, he found these books. He says, I eagerly seized the prize. So somebody just left their backpack out there with their books in it. And he just found them and thought, ooh, cool. Fortunately, the books were written in the language, the elements of which I had acquired at the cottage. They consisted of Paradise Lost, a volume of Plutarch's Lives, and the Sorrows of Werther. So, he just comes upon this book. He's taught himself to read, so he starts reading these books. And here's where it talks about Plutarch's Lives. The volume of Plutarch's Lives, which I possessed, contained the histories of the first founders of the ancient republics. The book had a far different effect on me from the Sorrows of Werther. I learned from Werther's imaginations despondency and gloom, but Plutarch taught me high thoughts. He elevated me above the wretched sphere of my own reflections to admire and love the heroes of past ages. Many things I read surpassed my understanding and experience. I had a very confused knowledge of kingdoms, wide extents of country, mighty rivers, and boundless seas, but I was perfectly unacquainted with towns and large assemblies of men. The cottage of my protectors had been the only school in which I had studied human nature, but this book, Plutarch's Lives, developed new and mightier scenes of action. I read of men concerned in public affairs, governing or massacring their species. I felt the greatest ardor for virtue rise within me and abhorrence for vice, as far as I understood the significance of these terms. Induced by these feelings, I was, of course, led to admire peaceable lawgivers, Numa, Solon, and Lycurgus, in preference to Romulus and Theseus. So there you go. The creature signs off on it. And notice the effect that Mary Shelley says that the Plutarch's Lives had on the creature. They heightened his thoughts. They made him want to be more virtuous. And that is the effect I think most people would agree that these lives have on people. So, at number 4, it's critical for helping you appreciate the canon of world literature because it's been so influential. Number 3 is it helps you learn about Western civilization. That's because Plutarch himself was a very careful historian. If you pay attention when you're reading Plutarch, he'll tell you the sources he's using. He's very careful. He gives you a good example of how to do good history. He tells you what his sources are, and he gives you a variety of sources, and he weighs them. He says, I think this guy might be right, but this guy might be wrong, but this guy had a grudge against this guy, or, this one didn't expect any criticism when he said what he said. So he gives you a good example of what good history is, but he was a good, careful historian, and his focus was on the most significant figures in Greek and Roman history. Well, Greco-Roman history, that's the origin of Western civilization. So if you only studied, and I'm not saying you should only study Plutarch, but if you only studied Plutarch's Lives, you would walk away with a very solid understanding of Greco-Roman history. So it's good for that reason. Number 2, the second most important reason that I think you should include Plutarch's Lives in your homeschool curriculum is it makes you a better citizen. It inspires you to be interested in your civic duty and politics. And in fact, this was high on the list for Charlotte Mason. I think one of the primary reasons she recommended Plutarch was because it inspired you to be a good citizen. I'm going to read this that she had to say about Plutarch in this regard. So Charlotte Mason writes, "We find Plutarch's Lives exceedingly inspiring. These are read by the teacher with suitable omissions and narrated with great spirit by the children. They learn to answer such questions as, in what ways did Pericles make Athens beautiful? How did he persuade the people to help him? And we may hope that the idea is engendered of preserving and increasing the beauty of their own neighborhood without the staleness which comes of much exhortation. Again, they will answer, how did Pericles manage the people in time of war, lest they should force him to act against his own judgment? And from such knowledge as this, we may suppose that the children begin to get a sympathetic view of the problems of statesmanship. Then, to come to our own time, they're enabled to answer, what do you know of A, county councils, B, district councils, C, parish councils, knowledge which should make children perceive that they too are being prepared to become worthy citizens, each with his several duties. So I think what she's getting at here is, I don't know about you, I had to take a civics course in high school, but I thought it was boring, and I don't remember anything from it. It just didn't capture my imagination. I didn't appreciate at that point the importance. I mean, I knew on the test, of course, I knew it's important to be a good citizen. I knew that it was sort of in an abstract way, but what Plutarch's Lives does for you is it shows you people that you can admire, people who do really great things, people that you want to be like when you grow up, basically. And it shows you those people, the people that you admire, they were interested in politics. They were interested in preserving the health of the state. And I think, just practically speaking, the importance of preserving the health of the state should be brought home to all of us in the times that we live in now. A country can be as mortal as a human being. And if individual citizens don't stand up and do their best to preserve the life of the country, it will go to ruin. That's a lesson everybody needs to learn. But Plutarch teaches the lesson in a way that appeals to the imagination. Even Plutarch himself, I want to be Plutarch when I grow up. I want to be Plutarch. Plutarch wasn't even a great statesman, like Julius Caesar or somebody like that, who moved things in a big way. He was just involved in his own little town, doing the things that were important there. But that, because I like Plutarch so much as a person, it gives me a different way of appreciating civic duty. So it definitely has that effect as well. Now we're coming to the number one reason that you should read Plutarch, and that is, it's kind of been hinted at throughout this whole thing, but to me, it is the number one reason, the thing that appeals to me the most, the reason that it is on the list of topics that I will cover with my own children, and that is that reading Plutarch, I believe, makes you a better person, makes you a more moral and virtuous person. And it does so, like I said, by giving you the lives of these people who can appeal to your imagination, but who also, their appeal is that they were good and virtuous. Plutarch shows you how cool it is to be good and virtuous. In all of his stories, now obviously none of these people are Jesus, so none of them are perfect. But what Plutarch does is his whole purpose in writing these lives is not primarily to teach us history, although, as I said, it's great for learning history. His primary purpose is to give us models of virtue, or even when the people in the stories aren't behaving virtuously, Plutarch includes these as well to help us see what to avoid. The overall effect of reading Plutarch's Lives is that it will inspire a love of virtue, a love of, justice and courage and honesty and humility and wisdom. This is what reading Plutarch does for me, and it has done for the majority of people for centuries. It's wonderful for this reason. And you get, for instance, when you read about Alexander the Great's courage, you want to be courageous like Alexander the Great. When you also read that same man, Alexander the Great, was very gentle and respectful to the women of Darius's household that he captured. He was a perfect gentleman to them, even though, by the standards of his day, people might have expected him to do otherwise. He didn't. So you read that and you think, I want to be like Alexander the Great when I grow up. I want to be a gentleman and I want to be courageous. This is some of my favorite quotes too about Cato, the Younger, is another person that he talks about. Says, there was a high opinion of Cato, so high an opinion of Cato the Younger, that an orator said to the judges on a certain trial, when the evidence of a single person was produced, that it was not right to believe a single witness, even if he was Cato. So Cato had such a reputation for virtue that people started working his name into proverbs about stuff like that. So this guy says, look, even if Cato said it, it's just one person. We shouldn't take the word of one person. And then here's another. It says, many persons now are used to say, when speaking of things incredible or contrary to all probability, as by way of a proverb, that this could not be believed even if Cato said it. So, that is the way everybody should want to be. Everybody should want their word to be a proverb like that, a proverb for honesty and integrity. So, and this is how Plutarch himself put it. So I'll finish with this. This is a quote from his Life of Timoleon, where Plutarch is basically describing his purpose in writing these lives and also the effect on him of writing these lives. Plutarch says, "It was for the sake of others that I first started to write biographies, but I soon began to dwell upon and delight in them for myself, endeavoring to the best of my ability to regulate my own life by them, and to mirror the virtues I saw in these great people. By the study of their biographies, we receive each person as a guest into our minds, and so train ourselves by constantly dwelling on the memorials of the great and the good, that should anything base or vicious be placed in our way by the society into which we are necessarily thrown, we reject it and expel it from our thoughts by fixing them calmly and happily on what is noble." So, hopefully, this helps convince you that you should definitely include Plutarch in your homeschool studies, and I hope that you will join me here on the Rooted Willow Homeschool channel as I go through Plutarch's lives. And so, hopefully I'll see you around.